So what are the key documents that my Minnesota business really needs to get up and going? Before you go through this video and try to do all of the documents, a bit of warning. We're going to go through 6 different levels, 6 different types of documents. We look at them usually as a pyramid, and we start at the bottom, we work our way to the top. But your business may not actually need all of the documents we talk about. In fact, it's pretty common that what's good for your business is not going to be what's needed for a different business. My law firm has a certain set of documents that I need. Your software company can have completely different legal needs and completely different documents. So we want to make sure we're getting the right documents for you and your business. So work with your attorney, work with your accountant, work with your financial advisor to make sure you've got the right documents in place for you and your business. Where we start on this pyramid is at the bottom with what we call formation documents. So in Minnesota, your formation documents get filed with the state of Minnesota, the Secretary of State's Business Division. And the first document is going to be your articles of organization or your articles of incorporation. They're basically the same document. The difference is what kind of company you're forming. If you're forming an LLC, we're looking at articles of organization. If we're forming other type of companies, we're looking at articles of incorporation. Once we've filed our documents with the state, now we have to look internally at some documents we need to keep on behalf of the company. Now, if you're running your business on your own, like a single member LLC, this is a step that a lot of people try to skip, and they figure they'll either deal with it later or it's not something they have to worry about. However, I'm here to tell you we need to make sure we have the right documents in place. And in this case, if it's a single member LLC, that's an operating agreement. If you have a different type of company, it may be a shareholders agreement, it may be corporate bylaws, but whatever it is called for your particular business, it's an important document that says how the business operates, who the owners are, what the structure looks like. This becomes very important if your business ever ends up in a lawsuit and you're trying to convince somebody that this is actually my LLC and I'm not just trying to hide behind it, so you can show your operating agreement to a court that it's a lawsuit, and the court can say, obviously there's an operating agreement here, we're going to enhance and protect this person's personal liability through the LLC structure. The other option is if you don't have any of these documents, it looks like you're really just running a side hustle, not really a business. And especially if you want to take on investors down the road, they're not going to want to pay full price for a business that doesn't have any corporate documents. So these are very important documents to have in place, and it's good business to have them in place as well. Now, you may not sign them the day after you form your company. You may need to build for a little bit and save up some money to put together these documents, but it's not something you want to leave off too long. Minnesota does not require you to have an operating agreement if you're an LLC. However, some states, if you end up going to a different state, actually do require an LLC operating agreement to be signed within a certain number of days after your company has been formed. Once we're done with formation, the next step we're going to look at is going to be federal and state compliance documents. On the federal level, the main document that every business is going to need is going to be your EIN, your employer identification number. Think of this like a social security number for your business. Each business, once it's filed in their state, needs to have one of these so you can file your taxes at the end of the year. So this is a pretty simple process. You go to the IRS website and you can fill out the information, and you can actually get your EIN within minutes online. They'll show you a PDF and then mail a copy to you as well. If it's not something you feel comfortable doing, you can reach out to your attorney, you can reach out to your accountant. It's a pretty straightforward process that we often will perform for our clients. Now, depending upon what kind of business you are engaged in Minnesota, you may need to get a business license or some kind of a permit. So if you're selling things to the public, you may need a sales tax permit. If you're someone like me who's a professional, you need a license. So lawyers, doctors, accountants, that's a license. And then if you're selling food, you may need a food service license as well. So it's important to understand that if you are doing certain kinds of economic activity, you may need either a license or permit. The Minnesota state has a very good website that shows you all the different types of licenses and permits and can help you figure out whether or not you need it. The final thing we're going to look at as far as the state level compliance is going to be your annual report. So with that Secretary of State filing, when you set up your business, you'll go back to the Secretary of State website about a year later, and you'll do your annual renewal form. It's very simple to do. It's straightforward. You just have to check a few boxes. But if you don't do it, then the state of Minnesota can actually dissolve your company, meaning it's not technically active, and then you'll have to go back later and file again to reinstate it. It's a lot easier just to get your annual report done so you don't have to worry about that down the road. The third level of our pyramid is going to be your financial documents. And the first place we're going to go is your bank. So your business should have its own separate bank account. So if you've been running this as a side hustle and maybe it's just a sole proprietorship, maybe you don't have a separate bank account, you were just putting it into your joint checking account with your family, you can do that, but it's not a good idea. It's going to create headaches for accounting season. And also, again, if you end up in a dispute and a lawsuit and you're in front of a judge, it's hard to argue that you shouldn't be personally liable for your corporate debts when all of the money is actually going into your personal bank account. So we want to make sure we have a separate bank account. And the way we get that bank account is going back to level 2. We have our EIN, your employer identification number. The bank will need that so that they can get your bank account set up. We're also going to start looking at keeping track of accounting and tax records in this stage. So you're going to have your bank account. At the end of the year, you're going to have various tax statements. If you've paid out certain money to people, you may need to give them a W-9 to fill out so you can issue a 1099 to them. If you've been doing work for another company, you may get a 1099 from the other company for the payments they've made to you. We want to make sure with our accountants, we've got our balance sheet, we have a profit and loss statement. You want to keep track of your expenses. You want to look at your payroll records if you have employees. And again, you want to make sure you have your 1099s and W-2s all filled out and taken care of January of each year so you don't have any problems with the tax folks. And the final part of the business records we're going to look at is going to be your insurance policies. So this is another professional that it's very good to involve in the process, and that'll be your professional business insurance agent who can advise you on things like liability insurance, workers' compensation insurance, property insurance, and then professional liability insurance if you're licensed like a lawyer or a doctor. The next level of our pyramid is going to be the employment and the HR documents. So these, whether you've been working for somebody else or you've worked in a big company, you've probably run into a bunch of these over the years. Now that you're running your business, you want to make sure you have everything properly documented. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at employment contracts. So if you're running a single member LLC and you have no employees, then you don't have to worry about this type of document. However, as your business grows, if you bring on employees, it's usually a good idea to have an employment contract with anybody who you're hiring as an employee. We want to have their role clearly spelled out, their salary, their benefits, the responsibilities of their job, your expectations, the hours they're going to work, and what the rules are regarding termination. You want to reserve a certain right to yourself on when you can terminate their employment. You want to make sure that's in the employment agreement, because if it comes to it down the road, you want to be able to show the judge that you had a contract. As you have more employees, you'll also want to look at creating an employee handbook. Now, this is something that's very common to find online, but before you just print out one that you find and just hit the save button and give it to everybody, make sure you're working with the employment handbook that works best for you and your company. This is where you can work with either an HR service or you can work with an attorney to make sure you've got the right handbook for you and your employees. And if you're not going to hire employees, but you're going to bring on certain people to help you just on projects, you may want to look at independent contractor agreements. So in this situation, the person you're paying is not actually an employee of your business. You don't pay taxes for them. Everything is on their end. They're not an employee. You want to make sure you're spelling out intellectual property rights. So if they work for you and they're going to create documents for you that your company then owns, the documents that are created after the fact, those are our independent contractor agreements. We want to make sure we have those in place. And finally, if we're working with something kind of high tech or something we don't want publicly out there, you can look at what we call an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. This can be a very important contract, especially in the software world, where we want to make sure that there's no information being leaked about the new program or the app that you're working on. The NDA is definitely something you'll need in place in those situations, and it's not something you want to just go online and download an NDA that you found, or just talk to your friend who you may not have known. In fact, that's all they did. They went to a website, just downloaded an NDA. The fifth level of our pyramid, your contracts. Contracts are the lifeblood of any company. Whether you're dealing with individuals, whether you're dealing with companies, whatever you're doing, you want to make sure you have a contract. First thing we're going to look at is things like service agreements. So if you're like me and you're providing legal services to somebody, we have a retainer agreement, which is a contract between myself and my clients that says what are the services I'm going to provide, what's the payment look like, are there timelines and deadlines involved, and what do we do if there's any kind of a dispute or if there's some kind of a liability question between us. If you're selling goods, we're looking at things like sales contracts. Same principle, we want to make sure we have all the right details in the contract to show what you're selling to somebody, what the price is, what the payment terms are, is there a timeline again, do we have a return policy? So even if you're selling things, we want to make sure we have that sales contract in place, especially for larger items. Now, if you're running a store and you're selling a piece of bubble gum, you're not going to have a contract for every piece of bubble gum you sell. But in a lot of other situations when we're selling to the public, especially, we want to make sure we have a sales contract in place. And then also we want to have vendor agreements. So if you are working in that store and you have a vendor that's supplying you with all the different types of bubble gum, chances are you're going to have a vendor agreement with them for them to provide the bubble gum for your store to then sell. So no matter how you're dealing with the public or dealing with your vendors, we want to make sure that your contracts are all in place, they're up to date, they've all been properly signed, that you understand what they say and what they mean. You want to make sure that you haven't tried to bring a Florida contract and make it enforceable in Minnesota. So we want to make sure that those contracts are tailored to you and your business. And the top level, the final thing we want to look at, the sixth level of our important documents, is going to be intellectual property and business protection documents. So these are the kind of documents that you may or may not need, but it's important that you know about them. First thing we're going to look at is trademark registrations. So you want to make sure that if your business has a unique name, if it makes sense, you can reach out and you can trademark it. You can go to the U.S. Patent and Trade Office and trademark it with the federal government. You can actually trademark with the state of Minnesota as well. So you want to make sure wherever you are in that process that you've got your trademark worked out. And even if you haven't filed for it yet, you want to make sure that you keep examples of when you use that trademark in commerce, as I say, in business, to show that you've been using that name. And so if down the road you get sued on it, you can say, no, I started using this on January 1st of 1998, and this person suing you for trademark just opened their business in 2024. The court can say, well, obviously you've been using it since 1998. It's not an infringement of this 2024 business for trademark purposes. Similar to trademarks, we have copyrights and patents. These are a little more involved, especially when we get to the patent level. If we're going to be patenting inventions or processes for your business, you definitely want to work with an attorney. I've dealt with a few litigations over the years where people thought they had a patent or they were in the process of getting a patent, and then somebody else came along and they tried to sue them on that patent, only to find out that the government never issued the patent and their lawsuit was dismissed because you can't enforce a patent against somebody else if you actually don't have that patent. And then finally, for the long-term growth of your business and the long-term legacy, we're going to have a business succession plan. And what this will say is what happens after you're gone. If something happens to you, something happens to the other founding members, we want to have a plan in place so the business can continue. And we want to make sure that they're still receiving money from the business even after you're gone, if you're no longer running it. A business succession plan is a very important document to have in your toolkit. So hopefully you've seen we've got this pyramid of documents. We start at the bottom with formation, all the way to the top with intellectual property. As I said at the beginning of the video, you don't need all of the documents, but you probably need some. And in order to help you pick it, you want to make sure you're working with an attorney and a financial advisor and your accountant to get the right documents for you and your business. If you've got more questions, you want to talk further, you can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. There's a red legal strategy session button on the front page. Click that and you'll be taken to my calendar where we can set up a legal strategy session. If you like this video, you can hit the like or thumbs up button below. You can subscribe on YouTube for future videos. If you have any other questions you'd like me to discuss, feel free to set up that strategy session or leave a comment with questions, and we can happily try to connect with you and get you those answers. Hopefully you've seen the importance of these key documents for your Minnesota business, and we can make sure we get you the right steps moving forward so your business is protected.